Jehuti, 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 Dua Jehuti, Om Ya. It's okay, Uja. Greetings, everyone. And once again, welcome to our continuing discourse into the Kybalion. I was looking at the schedule. I think this evening was supposed to be our last class. But obviously, we've only completed 4 of the 7 principles. Hopefully, we can complete the 5th this evening, and we can try to finish it off next week. But it seems like we might go for 2 more weeks, but we'll see. We'll try to see how much we can do, but not to rush it or not to give the full teaching. So you've been attending these courses, so you know that we've completed these 4 principles, core principles of the Kybalion: mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, and we're going to be delving into rhythm this evening. So the pyramid is being built. We're almost there. Yeah, we're getting there. And each of the 4 that we've discussed have a core principle, a core idea within them. So for mentalism, the all is mind, the universe is mental. For correspondence, as above, so below, as below, so above. Vibration, nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Polarity, everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pairs of opposites, like and unlike are the same. And obviously we went through all of these and did extensive discourse on these principles. So now this evening we'll move forward with the principle of rhythm. So we are at Hermetic law number 5, the principle of rhythm, principle dictate 5, which states that everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The related posits that goes along with principle dictate 5. Therefore, the good is like itself alone and unlike all things else. Number 2, the oneness, being source and root of all, is in all things as root and source. Without this source, there is nothing, whereas the source itself is from nothing but from itself. And they give up the body unto its proper death. They turn away from the disgust. They turn away with disgust from its sensations, from what knowledge of what things they operate. I'll close up all mental entrances and cut the mental actions off, which base and evil energies induce. Two of the primary, could say, facets of the principle of rhythm is neutralization and compensation, and we'll discuss those more in detail. Here we have a makeshift pendulum, and you see that the pendulum swings left and right. And this is actually what happens to your mind. Your mind is constantly swinging left and right. And here is another kind of pendulum that expresses a force or energy. And your mind operates in much the same way as well. And we'll discuss those in greater detail. So rhythm is tied deeply into the Assyrian resurrection. So as you know, we have a seminal myth, ancient Egyptian myth, foundational myth of our tradition. And it is known as the Assyrian resurrection. And principally, Asar and Aset came together, recalled the deities of Anunian theology. Shu and Tefnut, Geb and Nut are the cosmic divinities. They're the cosmic deities. And then you have the terrestrial or human divinities. Asar, Aset, Set, Nebuchadnezzar, Set, Heru, These are the divinities that make up the human personality, as it were. If you take those principles of the human system and mythologize them, what you arrive at is that Aset and Asar are kin, they're brothers and sister. They're husband and wife. In ancient Egypt, when people got together, married people got together, they would call each other brother and sister. And Aset and Asar, they had a son, and his name was Heru. When Heru came of age, and this is after the calamity that befell Asar, there was an elaborate party, and he was placed in a coffin. He thrown down a river. Aset found him, and when she found him, she opened a coffin. She laid with him, and they had a son, and his name is Heru. Then Asar went to the netherworld, into the inner shrine as Sokar. So the part of the myth that we're working with right now is Asar has ascended into the netherworld as Sokar, and Heru has come of age. So Asar comes back to the world to converse with Heru. And so he asked Haru, he tested Haru. He asked him a few questions to ascertain his readiness for battle. It was ordained that he would enter into battle with Set, which is his uncle, the brother of Asar. Haru passed this testing from his father Asar. His father said, "Okay, you've answered all my questions correctly. You can enter into the battle. You can face your enemy, your nemesis." Haru, being a willing combatant, entered into this battle with his uncle, and it was sort of a war of attrition. The Haru and Set are equal in power, so Haru has to do something to overcome Set, and that's what the principle of rhythm is about. And Haru entered this great battle, and it was a war of attrition, and Haru, being exasperated, he took counsel with his mother. He went to Aset. She's the goddess of wisdom, intuitional wisdom. And he went to her and he asked her, what is the nature of my body? He was trying to find out how to overcome Set. So you're asking her about his nature. And she told him, Haru, my son, sex is a thing of bodies, not of souls. Armed with this knowledge, armed with this new knowledge, this wisdom, Haru goes back into the struggle, into the fight, into the battle. What she was trying to get across to him was the illusory nature of his body, and of sensorial pleasure. He also went and he had a discussion with, I don't want to show that yet. He had a discussion with one of his primary teachers, which was Jehuti. I think I have it. What I want to show is here. Okay. He had a discussion with his primary teacher, which was Jehuti. And Jehuti, armed with this teaching that the body is the sex is a thing of bodies, not of souls. And so with that, he's realizing that his essential nature is soul, is spirit. He also went and he knew that Set was a tenacious enemy, so he also sat with Jehuti. And Jehuti gave him I'm extrapolating on a myth, gave him a special teaching. He asked Jehuti, how do I gain immortality? What do I need to do to attain immortality? So I can defeat Set. And here is Jehuti. And here on the other side of this wall is Heru. And what's happening is that the wisdom of Jehuti is being swung towards Heru. So the wisdom of the intellect is being swung towards the spiritual aspiration component of your personality. It's like a pendulum that is stuck on an intellectual level, the higher intellectual level. And as spiritual aspirants, what you're to do is to cause that pendulum to swing in its opposite direction towards the spiritual aspiration component of your personality. And Jehuti told Heru this teaching. He says, knowledge of God has come to us, and therefore ignorance has been banished. Experience of joy has come to us, and therefore sorrow will flee. After joy, the power I summon is self-control. Now I call steadfastness the power opposed to lust. This step is the seat of justice. I summon the sixth power, generosity, opposed to greed. With greed gone, I next summon truth. Deceit flees, and truth is present. See how, upon the arrival of truth, the supreme good arises. Envy has fled far from us. The supreme good, together with life and light, has followed upon truth, and the torments of darkness no longer fall upon us, but conquered, they all fly off with a rush of wings. And if this teaching is understood, then obviously Heru is going to win the battle. Heru is going to triumph. And this teaching is actually a formula of how to dissolve and disintegrate the negative forces or powers that circulate through the psyche of a human being. It shows the antithesis to the negative forces that tend to control your life. And if you apply those forces, what's happening is that you would be swinging your pendulum from your lower attributes to your higher attributes. You'll be swinging the pendulum in the opposite direction, from negativities of mind to positive attributes of mind. You're swinging the pendulum in the opposite direction. You're taking the force to a plane, a place where you can experience higher consciousness. So this is a mystic formula for the mind. First, knowledge of God. And with knowledge of God, ignorance of the knowledge of that higher truth is banished, is dissolved, is taken away, is destroyed, is neutralized. In chemistry, neutralization, different spelling, is a chemical reaction in which an acid and a base react quantitatively with each other In a reaction in water, neutralization results in there being no excess of hydrogen or hydroxide ions. So the hydrogen and hydroxide ions become dissolved that are present in the solution. The pH of the neutralized solution depends on the acid strength of the reactants. So as the acid strength of the reactants decrease, the alkalinity of the solution increases. From a health perspective, you want to be in a more alkaline body environment. When you have an acidic body environment, the colds, the flus, the fibromyalgia, the arthritis, the heart disease, the strokes are a result of an acidic body environment because you're not neutralizing that acidity with green drinks, with lime water, with coconut water, with supplements, vitamins, especially vitamin C. You're keeping your body in an acidic environment, and so it becomes disease. You want your body to be more alkaline. The point here is that these powers act like a chemical reaction, like a pH chemical reaction. If you add knowledge of higher nature to the mind, ignorance becomes neutralized. You don't have elements of ignorance in the mind. The knowledge of divinity means that you are experiencing that, and that experience brings a certain joy. And when you experience that joy, then sorrow is banished, sorrow flees. So you don't have the sorrow of if someone dies on you, if you lose something, if someone leaves you, because you're experiencing you're having a higher experience of happiness that is not contingent on worldly conditions. Once you're experiencing that joy, then your self-control, you develop self-control of your personality, the workings of your mind, how your mind is functioning. You control your mind, your thoughts, your feelings, your desires. You have control of mind. And this is called steadfastness. Steadfastness, if you are steadfast in self-control, that is the power that opposes lust, promiscuity, having many partners, all of that kind of all of that kind of behavior that drains your energies. And when lust is controlled, then that is the seat of justice. Recall that Isis gave to Horus the great teaching that the sex is for the body, not of the soul. So what is the reality? So the justice is relating to a higher understanding of self. Then, if you apply generosity, what becomes neutralized is greed. Greed and your personality. And you know, a lot of people, you just watch the news and you see where greed is controlling people. And so these people can't come into this country because they're going to be taken over, and they are this and they are that, and all this nonsense is because people are controlled by lower forces. They are controlled by lower powers. And one of the most inimical of the lower powers is greed, hoarding. If there is greed, then there cannot be truth. And with greed gone, then truth arises. And if you have truth, then you cannot be deceitful, angry, vengeful, because truth is present. And the highest truth is that you are essentially one with the self. You are one with the self. That means that you are one with everything. You're one with all things. And once truth arises, then the supreme good is is a poetic language to express or to talk about the infinite, the ultimate, the honorative, the nebular. And then if you are experiencing that transcendental self, then you can't be envious of anything or anyone, because everything is the self. So there's nothing to envy. There's no room for jealousy. And that life and light, life means the life of knowledge of self. And light means your realization of your inner light self. And that light percolates through your personality, and the torments of darkness no longer will fall upon you. When you are angry or jealous or lustful, you're in a state of darkness. You're being controlled. You're being thrown down. And this happens to people because they're not neutralizing the negative forces, the negative powers of the personality. And these tormentors because they are tormentors, they cause you anxiety, frustration. These tormentors, when you apply the antithesis, when you polarize yourself and cause the swing of your pendulum to swing towards the antithesis, towards the opposite negative attributable forces of the personality, then these negative attributable forces of the personality start to dissolve as if in a solution. This is the science of mind. But you have to put it all together. You have to realize what we're doing. I mentioned polarity twice in this explanation so far. So the teaching that the universe is mental, the all is mind, is related to correspondence. And yet, polarity has no power without your understanding of rhythm. We don't come to an understanding of rhythm and a rhythmic flow of the mind, then your capacity to polarize yourself is greatly diminished, is greatly reduced. What we're talking about here is science of mind. So you have to practice these things. And we're going to introduce a year-long practice of these disciplines. So you have to undergo training and practice in the science of mind, of controlling these psychological forces of the mind, so you can gain power over them. You can, instead of the mind controlling you, you control the mind. You control your mind, you control your destiny. And not only you control your destiny, you fulfill the destiny of the soul, which is spiritual enlightenment. Polarity means that there are poles. That means that there are extreme opposites on each side. Rhythm means that there are points between the opposite poles. So the mastery of rhythm is that it operates as a pendulum, and you're being instructed, taught how that in rhythm, the idea is that in rhythm, you very rarely move to the extremes of the poles. So you have polar opposites operating along the same pole, and the rhythmic flow of that pole becomes situated at certain points in between the opposites. If you will go to extremes of the poles, then you'll have a schizophrenic kind of personality. But most people have, you realize that most human beings that you interact with are not psychologically well. There's some level of mental disease in everyone who is not enlightened. They're operating they're being normal. They can act normal and lead a normal life, but that can only take a human being so far. They're still afflicted by the negative emotional states and conditions, still controlled by their desires. And so this science of mind is designed for you to take full control of the mind, and is so controlling your personality. As a practitioner of this teaching, you must realize that if the pendulum swings to the left, it's going to swing to the right. If it swings to the west, it's going to swing to the east. If it swings to the north, it's going to swing to the south. In an unconditioned or an untrained mind, that pendulum flows left and right, east and west, north and south, all the time. And so people have no control of this flow of mind. So their personality from day to day exhibits the rhythmic flow of the pendulum from state to state, condition to condition, one aspect of the pole to another aspect of the pole. As a spiritual aspirant of these teachings, you are trying to take control of that and understand how that pendulum works, how that rhythmic flow works. Rhythm is ever in motion. And the reason why that rhythm is ever in motion is because it's due to the principle of vibration. Recall, everything moves, everything vibrates. So if everything moves, if everything vibrates, so too is a rhythmic flow of the mind. And so the rhythm is constantly moving. In science, it tells us that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if you drive a car at a certain speed and hit a wall at a certain speed, the car is going to be damaged to a certain degree. If you do the same experiment and reduce the speed, it'll be damaged to a lesser degree. There is an equal and opposite reaction. And the pendulum's flow of the mind operates in a similar manner. So one day you're angry, the next day you're off, you're not angry, you're happy. But that's a negative way of experiencing life, because you are on the level of the pendulum swing, and so you are as if there was the imagery comes to mind. There was a musical artist. I think the song is called "A Wrecking Ball" or something. A very degraded song or whatever. But the artist, she sat on a wrecking ball, and the ball moves, and that's how most human beings are. You're sitting on the pendulum, and the pendulum is swinging, and so wherever the pendulum goes, you go. And spiritual aspirants, people who want to understand this teaching, try not to be controlled in that manner. For every outflow, there's going to be an inflow. For every efflux, there's going to be an influx. The pendulum operates, the pendulum flows, the pendulum is in constant motion. For every rise, there's going to be a fall. And this principle also operates in nature. It also operates in relation to nation states. The thing about it is that the ancient Egyptian pharaohs, along with the priests and priestesses, knew how to operate the cosmic environment in such a way to maintain a civilization for a long time, to negate the flow of the natural course order of things with relation to civilization. It eventually fell, but after many thousands of years. You look at where the United States is now. You have people who can't control themselves. So how can they control the forces of civilization? And they can't. And that's why you have climate change, global warming, constant wars, because these are energies, powers that are not being worked properly, and certain powers are not being worked at all because it's beyond the capacity of the people who are running the governments. If your government is run on capitalism and free trade, it's a matter of time before the crash is going to come, and they've had many crashes. You realize that the monetary system of the world is not based on anything real. It's a complete fabrication. It's called fiat currency. The printing of money, which is basically just printing numbers on paper. So what keeps it up is speculation and the trading of currency and all this kind of thing. But it cannot last because it's based on constant, infinite growth. How are you going to have infinite growth on a finite planet? The limitations of the planet, the upward flow or the upward growth of the economy is going to meet with the finite nature of the planet, and there's going to be a downfall because the planet will not be able to sustain an infinite growth paradigm. It cannot, and it's happening already anyway. So this aspect of the pendulum swing is everywhere in nature. It's in governments, in civilizations, with ants, with insects, with birds, with trees, the environment under the foliage in the forest. All of that is subject to the ebb and flow of the rhythmic movement, the cosmic force rhythmic movement of nature, of creation. The problem for humanity is that this rhythmic flow is also expressed in your mind. And so you have a problem in how you are going to control this rhythmic flow. What can you do to control it? This also plays out in the cosmos. Moons were once suns. Suns are going to burn out one day. And sometime in a few billion years from now, the sun that you see every day will not be a sun anymore. It's going to burn out, disintegrate because of this pendulum swing phenomena that occurs. There's going to be a dissolution of the earth, a dissolution of the cosmos. Everything is going to dissolve because the swing of the pendulum went towards creation. The swing of the pendulum is now going to start to flow back towards dissolution. Therefore, there will always be a birth and a death. There will always be a generation and a disintegration of what has been generated. And if the living entity, you, are not able to master this principle to a certain degree, you would be caught in the pendulum of birth and death. You'll be caught in the pendulum of the continual process of reincarnation. The ancient Egyptian scriptures refer to this reincarnation as Uhem Ankh. And you'll be caught in that. You'll be caught in that pendulum swing, birth and death, birth and death. The pendulum swings to birth, you come out of someone's womb. You have a material body that's tied to your mind and the sole attributable factor of your personality. That pendulum swing in the opposite direction, the mind and the soul is released from that body. Then this pendulum swings again and the mind and the soul becomes attached to another body. At the time of death, there's a releasing of that attachment to that body via the mind and soul. And it continues. And it will continue for thousands and thousands of years, if not millions, until the spiritual aspirant decides to discover the truth of the nature of self. And you do that by, you need knowledge of God. You need experience of joy. You need self-control. You need steadfastness. You need justice. The justice meaning not the temporal justice of justice in of a social matter, but justice in your capacity to realize what is just within yourself, what is truth within yourself. You need generosity. You need truth. And you need to experience the supreme good and to do away with all the tormentors. And in doing so, you would disintegrate. You would dissolve the flow of the pendulum back towards nature. In other words, you will not be reborn again. You will not pop out of somebody's womb again. And this, you can see, like, these people who are tormenting the kids that are trying to come over from El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, whatever. They're tormenting the kids, but they have forgotten that they were once children. And they've forgotten that they have children. And their children will have children. And what's going to happen when the pendulum starts to swing back towards their own children or towards themselves? Human beings are constantly putting themselves in a position to suffer because of ignorance, because of prejudice, because of racism, because of ignorance, constantly causing themselves untold misery, suffering a life that's not worth living, no matter how much money you have. You're miserable on the inside, not feeling good about yourself. These are caused because of the pendulum being swung towards the negative attributable factors of the human psyche. And as spiritual aspirants, you have the righteous desire, or you should have the righteous desire, not to live your life like that. That's the life of an animal. It's the life of that's how dogs live. That's how animals live, territorial, fending only for themselves, hoarding food. Put two dogs together, feed them together, they start fighting. Greed. And that's how human beings act. Even wearing nice ties and nice suits, they're animals. And you yourself are trying to escape the animal nature, escape the lower nature. And this philosophy of rhythm, tied in with the philosophy of polarity, gives you a great upper hand, gives you a great advantage, as it were, in attaining higher consciousness. If one does not realize if the principle of efflux and influx, this needs to be understood. There's something you have to contemplate on. You have to think about that. If this is not understood, the movement of the rhythmic flow of the psychological forces of the mind, you would be caught in a manifestation of your moods. You would be you'll be at the level of your moods, and you'll be caught in their manifestations. What that means is that your moods would be your, like the teaching says, moods are poor masters, but good servants. What happened is that you can think in a terms of being a slave to your moods, but you can also think of being like you're caught by them. You're trapped. You're marbled into your moods and feelings. And by being marbled into them, then all that you can do, all that you can see, is the mood and feeling, and all that you can do, because that's all you can perceive, so that's all that you can see, then your personality must form itself according to your moods and feelings. People who live this way are caught by their moods and feelings. They are trapped by them. It's like living in a spider's web. Little insects. They fly around, and they get caught in a spider's web. And all that they can perceive is the spider's web, and they're trying to get out, and all that. And so their actions are actually being influenced by the condition of the spider web. Similarly, with misunderstanding or not knowing of this principle of rhythm, what happens is that all that you can see is the manifestations of the moods, and that you are caught with them. And so all that can occur is that your actions and reactions to the world are being dictated to you through the manifestation of your moods. So what I'm trying to paint the picture for you tonight is that this is a a deplorable condition. This is a lower condition. This is a slothful condition. And this is not the true condition of who you really are and what you really are. You are essentially a divinity caught in an illusory matrix of moods and feelings. It's a sort of a downfall. So I'm trying to paint the picture to you of how desperate this situation is. And so you should do everything in your power to come out of it. The key is to learn how to escape the law of rhythm. So rhythm is not something that you are trying to, when I said earlier that you're trying to control rhythm, I didn't tell you how you're going to try to control it. That's what we're going to talk about next. Rhythm is not something that you're trying to control cognitively. It is something that you are trying to escape. You have to escape the flow of rhythm. To try to control it, and by doing this that we're going to talk about next, you're controlling it. But that's not controlling it in a cognitive fashion. It's not doing something to try to control it. It's a very subtle aspect of the teaching, conjoined with polarity, that we're going to get into next. So rhythm is not something you're trying to control, it's something that you're trying to escape from. Trying to control rhythm is like trying to control the high tides and low tides of the oceans. You know, the ocean comes up, the waves come up on the beach, and then they go back. How are you going to control that? So you can't control it with something like itself. So there's something else that you must do. And that's what we're going to talk about shortly. The idea is to become unaffected by the movement of the pendulum from left to right on the conscious level of mind. The reason why is because the pendulum swing occurs outside of your conscious awareness. It occurs on the unconscious level of the mind. So to overcome its influence, you cannot use practically the unconscious mind. To overcome its influence and to be unaffected by it, you must use your conscious mind. So you must become consciously aware. Because if you don't do that, you'll be like the masses of people, not having control of your own life. But think about that. If you are tied into your moods, tied into your feelings, do you really have control of your life? You may have be able to perform certain volitional actions. For example, you might say, well, I want to become a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. So you go to school and you study those things. So you have certain volitional acts. But even those volitional acts, if they're examined closely, if your psyche is examined closely, and if your RU is examined closely, you'll find that even your volitional acts are not entirely volitional. They're being influenced by a karmic basis. However, since this principle underlies the conscious mind, is underneath the conscious mind, and there's nothing that you can really do to stop this flow left and right, then you must be able to consciously be in a condition or a state by which the flow of this pendulum left and right becomes ineffectual. It cannot affect you. Its power, its effects has lost its capacity. If, therefore, the pendulum swings left and right unconsciously, it means that human beings are sort of programmed. Your unconscious mind is programmed by your RU. And so your actions are being produced by the unconscious mind. So how you overcome the natural flow of the moods is to neutralize the flow of the pendulum. And this practice is referred to as neutralization. Now, this is not the chemistry-like neutralization we spoke about previously. This is a neutralization by which the pendulum is moving left and right and you are at another place, so it cannot have an effect. And this occurs when you rise above the pendulum. How one overcomes the natural flow of moods is to neutralize the flow of the pendulum with the practice of neutralization. This occurs when you rise above the pendulum and let it swing under you. The adept does not try to stop the pendulum. That would be a futile task. It would be like trying to stop the alternating high tides and low tides of the oceans. But if you were to rise above the movement of the swing, one would be unaffected by the flow of moods, anxieties, and desires. And this is a quote from the book, The Cosmic Mind, that I wrote a few years ago. So the idea is to neutralize the flow of the pendulum by rising above it. This is made effective. It's made activated when there's a rise in the conscious level of mind, in the aspect of an expanded awareness. Here, from the Temple of Amun, what I want to show you is the divine embrace. Here on this side, panel number 48, the initiate is being embraced by Amun. Amun is on the right, the initiate is on the left, and he has his arm wrapped around the chest and the shoulder of Amun. And Amun has his arm around his back and under his elbow of his opposite hand and is pulling him inwards. In the same temple of Amun at Karnak, but this is a sort of an obelisk-like structure. Actually, it's a tall papyrus plant, or tall papyrus plant. It's made out of stone. Here you have Amun in divine embrace once more. Here's the initiate. And this is in the Holy of Holies room. And here is Amun with his dual feathers. It's kind of hard to see. And the initiate, here's his right hand. And he has his hand around the abdomen of Amun, is showing it here. And he has his other arm around the back of Amun. So he's embracing Amun, have his arms around his abdomen and his back, and he's pulling Amun into him. And what you can't see, you can see it right here, is hard to make out in pictures. But what's happening is that Amun's phallus, Amun's erect phallus, is touching the initiate at the level of his navel. So what's happening is that this initiate, and I blew it up here so you could see a little better, and here's Amun, and here's his phallus, and it's touching the navel of the initiate. And what this means is that he's being infused with the spirit consciousness. He's being infused with higher consciousness, with Amun consciousness. Amun means the hidden. So he's being infused with that higher mystic realization, that higher mystic union. This is a mystic union between him and the divine, in the form of Amun. And so Amun is ejaculating spirit into him, in other words. And so he is discovering himself as spirit, rising above the swing of the pendulum. And what's happening here is that he's neutralizing the world. He's neutralizing the negative afflictive states and emotions. And therefore, the world is becoming, as this is occurring, the world is becoming ineffectual. The world is losing its power over the initiate. Here, this is from panel 50 from the Temple of Asar in the Amun Chapel at Abydos. And there's something very special about this panel. Here is Amun. This previous panel, I said something special about this panel, but this is this is very esoteric, it's very mystical, it's a very, very high teaching. This teaching is presented in the rear of the holiest room in the temple itself. And this temple is the Temple of Karnak is the largest worship structure that has ever been developed by human beings. You go there, it's massive, it's expansive, it takes up many acres. And this is the highest teaching in the highest room of the temple complex, the divine embrace. And what's happening, once again, is that he's being spiritualized, meaning that his mind is being blown, literally. He's discovering himself as the totality of all existence. So the world loses its power. When you come back from something like this, the world has lost all power. The world has been neutralized. This is another very special teaching regarding Amun. Here is Amun, and in before the reconstruction in this temple, it didn't have a roof. So a lot of the color has remained, but some of the color has been lost as well. In this instance, Amun would be painted blue. And here he is with the two plumes on the top of his head, representing a Set and Nebuchadnezzar. He's holding a wasp scepter, and the initiate is anointing his forehead. This is an anointing oil, an unguent, and he's anointing the forehead of Amun. There's something very special, and I'm not going to say it. You're going to see if you get it. We're going to be discussing these two lines, this one and this one. These two lines are related to Amun. And we'll also be discussing these two lines, the 4 in total, are related to this personality, the Pera, who is performing the ritual in the temple. So now we're going to start with line 1. So in line 1 is relating to this personality, Amun. This is Amun in his anthropomorphic form. You also see him in his ram form, but here he's in his human form. Meduje an Amun Ra. Meduje an Amun Ra. Her Ab. Men Maatra. DNNK. Kent. Kent. Neb. Kent and Neb. And so what it's saying is that words said by Amun-Ra, who is the innermost reality of Min Ma'at-Ra. So Amun-Ra is the innermost reality of Min Ma'at-Ra, this personality. I give to thee all-pervasive valor throughout all planes of existence. I give to thee all-pervasive valor throughout all planes of existence. So that's what Amun is bestowing upon the royal personality. Adi, and the valor that is being given is spiritual valor, meaning spiritual power, spiritual resiliency. The overcoming Set, overcoming the lower negative, afflictive propensities of the personality. To line 2, still referring to Amun. Ari and Sefekra Emjet Merhet. To cause an unloosening so that an unloosening, there should be, to cause an unloosening so that one may go forth forever, effortlessly. Merhet, this is Merhet, and it's an unguent jar. And the 3 circles under means like something plural. But in this context, it means something that is effortless, something that is easy, something that is able to be done with ease and perfection. So Amun is giving to him the valor, an all-pervasive valor throughout all planes of existence. So the physical plane, the astral plane, the causal plane, the various levels of the duat. He's being given power to overcome all of those temporal reflections of existence. And he's being given that so that there can be an unloosening, an unbinding from material existence, so that he can go forth to the higher ethereal realms with effortlessness. And the Purdah says to Amun, he says, Meduje an nesut neptawi men ma'atra diank. Words said by the royal, the Lord of the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt, Min Ma'at Ra, the giver of life. So Min Ma'at Ra is deified, in other words, because he's a giver of life. He gives life. He's the underlying spirit, and he is the when you absorb yourself in the absolute, you absorb yourself in Min Ma'at Ra. That's what's going on. He says, line 4, Sa Ra En Sunu Tef Meri F Neb Kau Tati Meri En Pata Sara. Son of Ra, the physician, beloved of his father, rising with supernal effulgence, Teti Meri En Pata, as the reality and essence of Ra. So he is the great physician, the great caretaker. This is I don't know how many people realize how many people walk into this room, how many thousands of people, and how many people were able to discern that he is the great physician. The people in the AEM class, you should be you should be in a state of joy right now. And actually, when we go to Kemet, we're going to spend some time in this area. He is the great physician, beloved by his father. And what I mean by the great physician, it means that he gives all health. He gives the health of the body, he gives the health of the mind, and he gives the health of the soul, as he is the reality, the essence of Ra. Mira, meaning he and Ra are the same. He and Ra are the same. The measure of the swing to the right is a measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The rhythm swinging Amun is the one who gives valor throughout all planes of existence. And when the pendulum swings towards the individuating principle, what is discovered is that individuating principle is the same giver of life, is Azra, and is the great physician that cures all the ills. So the pendulum is swinging between these two. There's a giving and a taking, so there's a compensation. There's the anointing of the divinity, and what that bestows is the valor and loosening of the bondage to material existence, and that also the realization that this personality is actually looking at himself. Rhythm compensates. What that means that even in your material form, material existence, that you should be able to identify the higher nature as yourself. What is given up is there's something that is taken away. And what is taken away is that you are in your material existence. But through your inner experience, you should be able to realize that your body is, although it is there, it is illusory, and you are essentially the innermost reality, the innermost self. You are the Amun, the so when you are anointing your statues, when you're anointing and giving your offerings, you're actually offering to your own higher nature, your own innermost self. Rhythm compensates. Therefore, the good is like itself alone and unlike all things else. So the good is you, and you are the good. If you are able to neutralize the flow of the lower powers or the lower energies of the mind. And so you must develop to do this, there's a development of the conscious awareness, an expansion of the conscious awareness. And these are things that you can actually do. That you can feel it can happen. That you can recognize a negative emotion inside of you, but you are so consciously elevated that you are unaffected by that negative emotion. And it exists, it manifests, it is a phenomena, but it has no effect, it has no power, it has no influence over your personality. The oneness being source and root of all is in all things, as root and source. Without this source, there is nothing, whereas the source itself is from nothing but from itself. So you are to see that your material existence, or what you are referring to as your personality, is only an outgrowth from a deeper reality. And that outgrowth from a deeper reality and the manifested entity that you are referring to as your personality is of the same essence, is of the same root, is of the same plane, is of the same nature. By thinking in this way, by actually thinking these things, what you're doing is that you're neutralizing the power of the negative flow of the mind. And you develop the capacity to polarize yourself. The task is not to polarize yourself to the extreme, but towards the desired end, and disallow the movement into the opposite plane or the opposite end. Sorry. Oops. It is important to know that the rhythm never goes into extremes, like we spoke about before, but into points along the opposite. So what you to do is, when you are polarized, let's say you are angry, and you let it go, and it polarizes into, and the rhythm flows into peacefulness. Then through the principle of rhythm and polarity combined, you situate yourself in the level of peacefulness. You disallow the movement of the pendulum in the opposite direction. So you need a strong mind, you need strong concentration. How you develop that strong mind and strong concentration is through the practice of vibration. And so if you have the practice of vibration, you're able to utilize the poles, you're able to manipulate rhythm by allowing the rhythmic flow to move to a desired pole that you, so when the pendulum starts to flow in the opposite direction, then you take conscious control of it and situate it at a position or a state that you want it to be. And then you hold it there. And the idea is to hold it there indefinitely. You can hold it there for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, a year, 2 years, 5 years. And when you get to a point where you are situated in that position and the pendulum becomes disengaged, it no longer works. And you do this in the very beginning by the art of refusal. So you refuse for it to move back into anger. You refuse to go back into anger. But if you lose the pendulum, then you allow it, and then you allow it to swing back, and then you control it and place it where you want it to be. And so you place it in a position where the personality, where you feel most at ease, most at rest. In the end, and they give up the body onto its proper death. They turn away with disgust from its sensations. And so what this means is that you are polarizing yourself from your senses. You're polarizing yourself from your sensorial perception. And if you're polarizing yourself from sensorial perception, it means that you're polarizing yourself towards spirit. You're giving up your body onto its proper death. It's to be done in the end, but also in meditation practice. We discuss the various phases of meditation. Those phases of meditation that occurs with this process is a replication of the death process of the body. You're replicating the processes of the body, its states and conditions as it goes through the final moments of its life. But if you have any degree of proficiency in this teaching, what would be happening is that you would be polarizing yourself towards the end of spirit at the time of death. And what happens is that you would be neutralizing the lower force of the Ari that is compelling you to become reborn. And so part of the practice is to pull yourself away from your senses. In other words, pull back your senses. Pull your senses into the mind and pull your mind into the soul and pull your soul into Ra, into pure spirit. And so there's a development of the remembrance of self, but a forgetfulness and knowledge of the operations of the senses. How does this play out in day-to-day life? Is that you're going about doing your work, doing whatever it is that you do, but you're not so tied into your senses. You're not feeling every sensation. You're not so tied into the feeling, like if you touch a piece of cloth, you're not so, oh, this cloth feels so great. Oh, it's so nice. Or if you're eating some food, you're not, oh, this is so lovely. This is so great. You're not tied into your senses. You are pulling them back so you can experience a deeper experience. So you're polarizing yourself, and you're polarizing your senses into the mind, and you're allowing the rhythmic flow. You're creating a rhythmic flow. You're operating the principle of rhythm whenever you go into your meditation exercise. You are actively taking over the principle of rhythm. You are taking rhythm, and you are taking metaphysical control of the process by the mental exercise of pulling back the senses, and therefore you are mentally taking the pendulum and swinging it towards the mind. If the mind is strong, you're taking those senses that you have pulled into the mind, and now you're taking the mind and you're pulling it into the mystic reality. And if that is in congruence with your understanding of the teaching, then you would pull yourself into Amun. You would do what is going on here. You would be infusing yourself with the knowledge of the spirit of Amun. And you would be fulfilling this metaphysical flow of the mystic pendulum. So this is the subtle aspect of the rhythmic flow. And thus what you're doing by taking control of the pendulum is that you are taking conscious control and swinging it towards spirit. And then once you let go of it, because of your meditative absorption, or as far as you can go, you let go of it and allow it to naturally pull back towards your body. You come back to your body after the meditation exercise, and the rhythmic flow of the unconscious becomes reactivated. But since you are experiencing higher consciousness, you are neutralizing the flow and the power of the lower attributable factors of the mind. And if the pendulum swings into a negative phenomena that is being conjured or being manifested in your personality, you would spontaneously be able to rise above it and render it ineffectual. That rising above it and rendering it ineffectual is a process, the practice of neutralization. When you take control of the pendulum, let's say it flows into peacefulness, and you situate it there, that is called rhythmic compensation. Something is being given up so that you can situate yourself in that condition. Compensation can also operate negatively, that you can become situated on the other side, the side of the negative factors, the negative powers. At that point, you can use your conscious will to go into meditative state or relaxation and pull yourself back into the opposite direction. The law of compensation means that the measure of the swing to the left is the measure of the swing to the right. And whenever you are swinging left and right, you're being compensated. Something is being given up. Something is being lost. And what you want lost are the base and evil energies, as the scriptures describe them. So you may also be compensated negatively. You may fall into an intense depression. And this shouldn't be happening to you all, people who are practicing the teaching, but it can happen. Let's say you fall into a depression, then you're being compensated negatively. And therefore, to come out of that, then you must consciously go into a state by which to allow the pendulum to pull back more to an equanimity, more of a balanced state of consciousness of mind. If you want to flow into happiness, then you must control how much happiness you experience. If you experience, this is only one example of the principle, using experience as an example. If you experience too much transitory happiness, you're going to build up too much energy on the pendulum. That energy is going to build up to a degree where it's going to force you to go back in the opposite direction, and you're going to experience sadness. So what you want is an equanimity of mind, a balance of mind. So you're not flowing left and right like a leaf in the wind. The same can be said about pleasure and pain. If you indulge in too much transient pleasure, or you're indulging in intense transient pleasure, you're building up too much energy, too much force that you will not be able to situate the pendulum. You'll not be able to make it stick on the side of joy. What happens is that energy has to go somewhere, so it's going to flow back into the plane of pain. And what will happen is that you will experience some form of pain, discomfort. The point is that with this teaching, you can learn to take control of your life. You can learn to take control of these powers and these forces that ordinarily will flow through your mind without you being able to do anything about them. You would be like nature. Like when it rains, it rains. When the wind blows, the wind blows. When it's hot, it's hot. When it's cold, it's cold. Since you are endowed with mind, you don't have to live that way. You don't have to be that way. You can rise above the condition and the flow of the pendulum left and right. The other important key to understand about this that I was alluding to earlier is that the flow of the pendulum may not occur in your single lifetime. Using the example of pleasure and pain, you can be an intense sufferer in this lifetime, and you can have years and years and years of suffering. And the pendulum doesn't flow towards pleasure until a succeeding lifetime. And so a succeeding lifetime comes and you experience pleasure and not so much pain. Similarly, in this lifetime, you can be experiencing intense pleasure, always going out, having all the sex you want, eating all the nice food. You're constantly having pleasure. You have not taken on the life of enlightenment. A lot of people do this. And so these people become deluded by pleasure. They think that this is how life is. The soul becomes deluded. There's a sar in the coffin. Then the person dies and a succeeding lifetime arises, and that person lives a life of suffering. Because the pendulum didn't swing in a previous lifetime, it swung back in the succeeding lifetime. And so taking on the path of rebirth is playing with danger. You're actually playing with fire. This also occurs with gender. This lifetime you're a man or a male figure. In the next lifetime you may incarnate as a lady. The pendulum swings along the pole of gender as well. And for some people, they get stuck in the middle and they become bisexual. For some people, it becomes convoluted. The body may materialize as a male, but on the inside they feel female. So they're gay. And it happens with the women as well. And so a spiritualist, people who are serious about these teachings, you don't take chances with the world. You don't take chances with the pendulum, because rhythm can be vicious. You don't know where that rhythmic flow of that pendulum is going to land, where it's going to become situated. And so in this life, you may think, oh, life is good, you know, I have a good job, make a nice salary, everything is good, I'm just going to live out this life. This is fun, I'm having fun, having children, grandchildren, everything is good, you know. I've lived my life, my children are in college, my grandchildren are going to nice schools, life is good, you live out this life of relative ease. And this is the delusion of material wealth. And then a person becomes reborn and the pendulum swings in the opposite direction and they live a life of hardship. A person who is wealthy in this lifetime may be homeless in a succeeding lifetime. Because the pendulum is relentless. It continues to flow left and right, north and south, east and west, continually until you rise above it. You neutralize it by understanding the principal law of compensation. Identification with the body is a swing of the pendulum towards the physical plane. Identification with the mind is a swing of the pendulum towards the mental plane. And once you're in the mental plane, and that's why this teaching is so powerful, if you're really getting to this teaching, the ego will not, It's just a matter of time before the ego is defeated. Once you get into this teaching, enlightenment is on its way. That's how powerful this teaching is. As once you swing towards the mind and you continue that swing, you'll swing towards spirit. If you understand that you are to continue the swing of the pendulum towards immateriality, towards deeper and deeper immateriality, what happens is that some people get caught in the mind, and everything is the mind, and everything is the mind, and everything is the mind. Yes, in ancient Egyptian teachings, there is a strong philosophy of mind, but it doesn't stop with the mind. In ancient Egyptian philosophy, it is understood that the mind is an outgrowth from a deeper underlying reality. If you get caught in the mind, you'll remain at the mental level, and that in and of itself has its complexities. And what you want to do is you want to allow that pendulum to continue to flow towards spirit. If the personality, you, were to gain control of the rhythmic flow of the polarizing element of consciousness, you would polarize yourself towards spirit, and enlightenment will dawn like the newborn sun rises over the horizon. The key to these teachings is to, yes, realize the mental nature of existence, but to have a dual understanding of this mental nature. So, although the scriptures explain the universe as a projection of mind, of the divine, you must interact with it as if it is, something that's a palpable reality. And by doing that, you're neutralizing the effects of material energy. Because if you try to become hyper spiritual and try to fall into nihilism and negate the physical reality of the world, what would happen is that material energy will cause a disbalance. In fact, you'll fall into the I call it the pit, or the downfall of the truth of the material energy of the world will arise. It's like hitting your head against a wall. You must be able to see through it and interact with it. And in that way, you negate nihilism, and at the same time, you control the rhythmic flow of the mind through and flow the illusory construction of creation. Thus, if this is known, the mind can be used to manipulate matter because it is more subtle than matter. So to manipulate matter, you must polarize yourself towards mind. However, the goal of spirituality is to develop a well-integrated personality, to become fully integrated, and not only taking up the mental and the negation of the reality of existence. You must still be able to talk to people, still be able to interact, still pay your bills, save your wealth, those kinds of things, but realizing that the all is mind, the universe is mental. And with that understanding, you gain substantial control of the swing of the pendulum and control of rhythm by rising above the rhythmic flow of the propensities of the mind. And with that, that would be the teaching for this evening. Are there any questions? Any questions? No questions? So rhythm is a more subtle one. It's rising above the key is rising above its influence and not trying to take, so if you rise above its influence, then its powers become dissipated. And then all you do is you stay above its flow. And if any negative form arises, then it'll be ineffectual. And actually what you're trying to do is you're trying to neutralize the world. You must allow yourself to be impregnated with spirit, to discover your spiritual self, to expand yourself to spirit domain. So that when you are looking at a deity, you're actually looking at a reflection of yourself. And that's the compensation, that the higher immaterial self, your physical body is a reflection of that higher immaterial self. And so there's a compensation in the perception, but there's a unity in the experience. And in that way, you neutralize the world. There's a question with these teachings. You really get into this, you'll be unaffected by the changes of nature, the changes that takes place in the world. Change will not be able to cause you undue stress or strain. You would have neutralized change. Ujasa, who is detachment rising above the pendulum. Detachment is an aspect of rising above the pendulum. So you utilize detachment to experience higher consciousness. So rising above the pendulum intimate a ascension or a rising above the lower mind. So you are existing in a higher mind. And in existing in higher mind, you as if are able to look down at the lower mind. And the lower mind may be doing its thing, but you'll be unaffected by it. And especially if you look through it and realize its illusory nature, like it's pure illusion, then it can be shifting left and right, it can be flowing, outflow, inflow, but you are unaffected because you have neutralized its power by rising above it. So it has no influence over you. One way to get there is by detachment. So detachment is a way to get there. So you detach and you rise up. You detach and you rise up. And that's where vibration comes in. So you have to utilize your principle of vibration to achieve higher consciousness and then stay there. And once you're there, the pendulum can flow back and left and right all at once. You're vibrating on a higher level. You're looking down at the lower mind, and you're incompatible with the lower mind at that point, and you don't mix with it, so it can't affect you. Anything else? So we have two more. We have cause and effect, and we have gender, and then we're done with the Kybalion. So this is to me, it's a very special scripture. The term for physician is right here. Sunu Tef. Sunu is physician, Tef is father, Mary beloved. Sunu Tef. So he's the physician. So the physician is the one that knows himself as Amun. The compensation is that he's knowing that he's a physician. So it's in the body, he knows himself as the physician, but the physician of the soul. So he's the inner healer of himself. He's brought himself to realize that he is Amun. So when he's looking at Amun, he's actually looking at a reflection of himself. And when he's offering to Amun, he's actually offering to his own inner higher self. He's able to do that because the pendulum has swung towards to that realization while there is a material form in existence. So the body is the compensation, but the realization is the oneness, is the establishment. Okay, anything else? Okay, so we'll do a closing chant if there's nothing else. Jehuti, 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 Jehuti. Dua mut konsu amun 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 amun. Okay, everyone, a tap. until we see each other again. Hit tap.
Dua, hit tap.